Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, air, restoration, and flood services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit BillHowe.com. And by the Conrad Trebas Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. By viewers like you. Thank you.
President Donald Trump is reviving one of the signature policies of his first administration, the travel ban. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi, and the latest version applies to people from a dozen countries, and it's set to take effect on Monday. KPBS military and veterans reporter Andrew Dyer says it's just the latest of several actions that have effectively ended Afghan resettlement.
On day one of the Trump administration, the president signed an executive order suspending refugee resettlement. In May, temporary protected status ended for thousands of Afghans resettled in the U.S. after Kabul fell to the Taliban in 2021. And starting this Monday, only visa holders from Afghanistan will be allowed to enter the U.S. In a statement, advocacy group Afghan EVAC called the new travel ban a disgrace.
At our height, we had 5,000 Afghans leaving on 28 flights a month from Kabul. It is working really well.
Sean Van Diver is a San Diego Navy veteran who helped start Afghan EVAC. Since 2021, the organization has worked with the federal government to help resettle tens of thousands of Afghans facing persecution and punishment from the Taliban for helping the U.S. during its 20-year occupation. Van Diver says even when the system was working, it wasn't enough. Now, the door's effectively closed.
There's more than 250,000 people that we've left behind, and the Trump administration degrading all of the infrastructure that we've built over the last 3.5 years means they're going to be stuck for a lot longer.
Trump's new travel ban doesn't affect Afghans already here, although other administrative actions have left many at risk of having their legal status revoked. Afghan resettlement was popular with many House Republicans, and Van Diver says it still is.
We still enjoy bipartisan support from across Congress. The question is, does it matter to the president? And it doesn't seem to.
He says exceptions for special immigrant visa holders may sound good, but it might not even matter.
The reality is that the infrastructure to help them has been degraded, and they're trying to turn it off completely.
The ban applies to 12 countries, mostly in the Middle East and Africa. Entry from 7 more countries is partially restricted. Andrew Dyer, KPBS News.
San Diego Unified officials are reaffirming their commitment to being a welcoming district for all. Before President Trump took office, the school district had taken steps to prepare educators for the possibility of ICE agents visiting schools and gave students and parents resources to better know their rights. Interim Superintendent Dr. Fabi Bagula says that this did this in anticipation, of possible actions against immigrant rights, LGBTQ rights, and the rights of other marginalized groups.
The truest thing I know is that you cannot learn if you are worried, if you are scared, if you are fearful of what's going to happen. And so I'm really proud of the fact that we're continuing to provide this type of environment for our students to be well, but also to do well.
District officials also said today no immigration and customs enforcement agents have been reported on any of its campuses.
We've been keeping cool and comfortable with our June gloom, I guess you could say, as the clouds continue to stay in place for us heading through tonight. And of course, we will have a little bit of drizzle possible from some of these. 63, the overnight low for the city. When do we start to lessen that marine layer a little bit? I'll have those full details coming up.
The San Diego City Council meets tomorrow to discuss changes to the proposed city budget. KPBS education reporter Katie Anastas says council members want to find a way to keep libraries open on Mondays.
Mayor Todd Gloria's budget proposal would close all 37 library branches on Sundays and Mondays, saving the city more than $8 million. Community members and advocates have argued that across-the-board cuts aren't fair to communities that need library resources the most.
People have really turned out and said, this is unacceptable. We understand that budgeting is hard, but we also have a set of priorities that we want to budget for. And we do that as individual families. We do that in our communities, and we expect our city to do the same thing. You know, there are priorities that we have, and we're not willing to give those up.
Next, San Diego City Council members will discuss their budget priorities. 8 out of 9 have said they want to see library hours restored, especially on Mondays. A new report from the city's independent budget analyst outlines the cost and staffing needs for Monday hours at 14 of the 37 branches, including the 10 libraries that offer after-school homework help. Monday hours would cost about $3 million for the full day and $2 million for a half day. 8 members also want to avoid cutting recreation center hours. That could cost between $300,000 and about $3 million, depending on the number of centers included.
The young people in these communities often do not have another option.
Councilmember Sean Ela Rivera says one way to pay for restored hours is moving up the start date for paid parking at Balboa Park. Gloria's budget suggests charging for parking starting January 1st. Ela Rivera and other council members say starting by Labor Day could bring in another $5.5 million. He says the city could also consider charging non-residents to park at the zoo.
We absolutely have the capacity and the ability to accelerate making those folks pay. Why would we not do that? And the benefit that comes from that could be reopening libraries, never shutting down libraries, never shutting down rec centers, never shutting down parks.
The city council will discuss the report on Friday. They'll make modifications and adopt a final budget on Tuesday. Katie Anastas, KPBS News.
Voting is now underway in the runoff election for San Diego County's District 1 supervisor. It's a race that will decide whether Democrats or Republicans have more influence over the county government. KPBS South Bay reporter Corey Suzuki says the top 2 candidates have different priorities when it comes to housing and homelessness.
Both candidates are clear on their priorities for housing and homelessness. John McCann is a Republican and the mayor of Chula Vista. He strongly supports bans on homeless encampments and says his top priority is supporting home ownership.
But I support the American dream. I want people who work in Chula Vista actually to own in Chula Vista.
McCann owns 2 property management companies and has received donations and endorsements from landlord industry groups. Running against him is Imperial Beach Mayor Paloma Aguirre. She's pushed for stronger tenant protections and has also backed harsher encampment laws. She says her focus would be on more affordable housing.
What we need is working class housing. We need low and very low and moderate level income housing.
If you live in District 1, the last day to cast your ballot is July 1st. Corey Suzuki, KPBS News.
You can find out more about the special election candidates, where to vote, and whether you live in District 1 right on our website. Just go to kpbs.org/voterhub. It is no newsflash that Americans don't trust the media. At 31%, that number hasn't been this low in 5 decades. Nor is it shocking that their news habits are fractured or that there's a straight line between the type of media Americans consume and their viewpoints. Here with me for an update on where we are vis-a-vis the news is Public Matters reporter Amita Sharma. Welcome, Amita.
It's good to be with you, Maya.
Can you please break it down for us? How are Americans consuming the news and what are they consuming?
Well, a majority of Americans are getting their news from devices, no surprise, a computer, a tablet, a smartphone. 29% of them are going to actual news websites. The rest of them are going to social media. I believe Facebook is the most popular, followed by YouTube, then Instagram. And another surprise, actually, another point that's not a surprise is that most of these people tend to be younger. Elisa Shearer is a senior researcher at the Pew Research Center, which collected the data. And she says it is very common for people to get their news on social media by chance.
Back to how people get their information, about a third of Americans often turn to TV for their news. Fewer still for radio and print. The New York Times has the highest number of subscribers, 10.8 million, followed by Substack, The Wall Street Journal, and The Washington Post. Fox News remains the most popular cable news channel, then MSNBC, with CNN in third. A poll just came out from the data firm YouGov, reaffirming what most of us already know. Democrats are much more inclined to believe the news than Republicans, but the latter's faith grew 7 percentage points from last year. Democrats trust PBS, the BBC, and NBC the most. Republicans, Fox News, Fox Business Channel, and Newsmax. 2 local voters' news habits match the poll.
So when I have the TV on at home, usually it's on Fox News, and then I do follow Fox News online. I follow Real America's Voices. I follow Newsmax, and I like to listen to podcasts, so I follow Rumble a lot as well.
Independent voter Mary Jo Petrovelli, who leans Democratic, reads the New York Times, the Washington Post, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the San Diego Union Tribune daily. She watches NBC Nightly News and CNN.
I also subscribe to Voice of San Diego and Axios locally and read their morning reports. I subscribe to the Bulwark, and my radio is, not to plug you all or anything, but my radio is like permanently set it to KPBS.
Dean Nelson is the director of the journalism program at Point Loma Nazarene University. He says it is crucial for a society to agree on a common set of facts and for people to view the news with deep curiosity.
You're on a quest. You're trying to find something. But if you live in a world of statements where this is it, this is a statement, this is the beginning, this is the end, then the root of the word statement is state. You're in a state, and you're not in any kind of motion at all.
And he advocates for people to consume the news with a dose of skepticism.
But that takes an active participatory inaction on the part of the consumer to maybe say, I wonder if that's true. And so then I'll maybe check another source or wait a day.
And just one more point on trust in the media, Maya. So both Democrats and Republicans have about the same level of trust in financial news sources such as Forbes or The Economist. But the most trusted news source in America, wait for it,
okay,
is the Weather Channel.
The Weather Channel.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for that surprising information and for breaking all of this down for us. We really do appreciate it, Amita.
Thank you, Maya.
And this story is part of our Public Matters initiative. You can learn more about it on our website, kpbs.org/Public Matters.
I'm Jeff Bennett. Tonight on the NewsHour, global reaction to the Trump administration's new travel ban. That's at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Emergency crews in Baltimore are now working to clean up thousands of gallons of red-colored fuel that spilled into the city's inner harbor. As Brian Abel reports, crews may not have time on their side with rain in the weekend forecast.
Parts of Baltimore's inner harbor tainted red Wednesday.
We can smell gas. Obviously, you can smell that gas, and we can see the oil on the water. But we know people are understandably concerned.
An estimated 2,000 gallons of diesel fuel spilling into it. The gas, containing red dye, staining the marina at the South Central Avenue Bridge. The source of the leak, a hospital facility, Johns Hopkins. A hospital spokesperson says a fuel delivery from a third-party vendor accidentally overfilled 2 tanks. Maryland's governor saying that at least 10 different city and state agencies responded to the emergency.
We have seen over 100 personnel literally worked through the night to make sure that we had this situation under control and contained.
The Coast Guard leading the containment and cleanup efforts, racing against the clock to flush the fuel from the leak point downstream to the capture point at the harbor before rain threatens the operation. Oil-absorbent materials and skimmers at the harbor are feeding the fuel into a 4,000-gallon pump truck. At least 24 oiled geese and other birds have been impacted by the spill, some taken to rehab by the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. Officials insisting that drinking water is safe and warning the public to stay away and use alternate routes while the cleanup continues.
Our top priority today, tomorrow, and every day is the safety of our residents and our environment. And we're going to do everything in our power to restore the area as quickly as possible.
In Washington, Brian Abel, KPBS News.
Nearly 6 months after the devastating LA wildfire, Southern California is still clearing fire-ravaged neighborhoods. And there is a concern about how these wildfires affected those who were on the front lines fighting them. Mary Bell Gonzalez tells us how experts are tracking the health of firefighters and what is being done to protect those who protect the public.
The urban wildfires we experienced here in LA were like nothing the country has ever seen before. Thousands of homes burned to the ground, including everything inside of them. And even with all the protective gear in place, firefighters and medical experts fear first responders may have been exposed to more than just smoke. Los Angeles Fire Department Captain Jeff Brown took this video from Fire Station 69 in Pacific Palisades on January 8th.
I knew we were in for a battle.
This was just the beginning of what would become LA's most destructive wildfires. For weeks on end, firefighters worked to calm the flames.
All the plastics, all the metals, all the unknowns. Well, that definitely poses some health concerns. And, a lot of us were pretty hurting in the lung category.
This wildfire exposure a concern for Captain Brown even months after the fires. And for pulmonologist Ashraf El Sayeg, whose own home burned in the Palisades fire. He opened this clinic at Providence St. John's Health Center in Santa Monica, specifically to help residents and first responders.
These firefighters are exposed to first the fires, and then they're still there. They're working on the ground during the cleanup phase, so they are very exposed to toxins.
In the short term,
we're seeing a lot of pneumonias, a lot of bronchitis, sinus infections. We're still seeing, chronic cough, chronic shortness of breath.
But it could be years before we learn the health effects of LA's exposure.
We don't have these large disasters every day, so we're learning as we go. With the World Trade Center, the one thing we did learn is that we have to treat the responders, the victims, as early and as quickly as possible.
The Los Angeles Fire Department has a dedicated chief of wellness to help firefighters get the medical help they need in this and in any other disaster. Right now, they tell us the department is encouraging its first responders to undergo screening and medical exams to help them track their health. Reporting in Los Angeles, I'm Mary Bell Gonzalez.
Hillcrest has been targeted with more hate crimes recently. Local leaders say those responsible will pay it back to the community. You may recall last summer there were 2 instances of hate-motivated tagging crimes on 5th Avenue and Robinson Street. 2 people were convicted of spray painting walls and trash cans with anti-LGBTQ+ slurs. District Attorney Summer Stephan announced their penalties today. They're ordered to pay nearly $2,500 plus another $200 to the restaurants involved. The Hillcrest Business Association is giving that money back to volunteers who sprang into action.
Now I'm so thankful that we have resources that just turns something horrendous into something beautiful and joyous.
DA Stephan says the vandals have also been placed on probation in order to complete LGBTQ+ education classes. 4 states, including California, are calling on the FDA to lift special restrictions on the abortion pill mifepristone. Attorney General Rob Bonta filed a petition along with his counterparts in New York, Massachusetts, and New Jersey. They hope that the move will push the FDA to review the extensive research that determined the pill's safety and effectiveness. The petition would also prevent the FDA from further restricting mifepristone. While the petition is pending, the FDA has 180 days to respond. Some hope for marine life off of our coast. For months, marine animals have been getting sick and even dying from domoic acid poisoning. But as Lori Perez reports, the toxic algae bloom appears to be over now.
When these sea lion pups are released, they'll be going back to a safer SoCal ocean than the one they left.
Our domoic acid toxicosis event is over for the time being.
Biologists say recent sampling of local waters show no signs of the algae that creates the toxic bloom that sickened and killed hundreds of sea lions, dolphins, pelicans, and even whales over the past 3 months. It is finally good news from the coast for the team at San Pedro's Marine Marine Mammal Care Center.
It's been rough.
Where for months now,
We've seen so many animals.
it's been triage, treat, and repeat as thousands of animals appeared seizing, dying, or dead on beaches from Ventura to Orange County. Rescue centers shared the burden and the pain.
It's not just the volume of animals, but the sea lions here, the females were pregnant, almost all of them. They all aborted their young. It was part of their rehabilitation, but also, the toxin is going to be deleterious to the baby that's inside. There were so many dolphin this time around as well, which is also tragic. So to see the volume of animals, the types of animals that are coming in, it was really hard on everybody.
The most severe and longest algae bloom in SoCal history was devastating for marine mammals, but also dangerous for people, with reports of sick sea lions turning aggressive and biting surfers. It was also the earliest bloom. Usually they begin in June, which marine biologist Dave Bader warns could mean
we still have another several months where a bloom of this type could reoccur.
He says it's a crisis created by humans that can also be solved by humans.
We need to do a better job of mitigating against the future effects of climate change, making it not as bad as it could be. That's step number one. It's a big step, but we have to take it. The ocean is telling us it's not well, it's not healthy, and we have to take those big steps to solve problems like this.
It's been somewhat of a cool, quieter pattern as we keep some areas of drizzle in the area. Even heading through tonight, the marine layer stays deep as we go into your Friday. And this weekend, we're going to start to find it thin out a little bit, which means we will have a warmer weekend for some of the mountainous areas and the deserts. We'll be a little bit above historical average, too, so we are going to be trending just a touch warmer. 63 the overnight low in the city as you work towards Oceanside. Plenty of clouds building in as we hit 62 for the low. Mount Laguna coming down to 56. Overall, a pretty quiet night for us. It takes a while for this June gloom to really wear off on us. So we are going to keep a lot of those clouds, especially towards our coastal communities, for a bit longer. 70 in the city as you work your way to El Cajon, 76, and Borrego Springs topping out near 100 degrees. But like I said, the pattern is to heat things up a little bit more as we head from there. Your Saturday forecast still really pretty quiet. The heat mostly stays through our desert southwest locations. So there will be some numbers going up into the triple digits in our desert communities, but the rest of us keeping obviously more of that comfort in store. Notice your Saturday and Sunday still holding on to the lower to mid 70s through the weekend, then maybe trying to warm up a little bit as we head into Monday and Tuesday for our coastal communities. We do hold on to a warm day on Sunday for our inland communities. Lower 80s. We'll keep that running into Monday, and even upper 70s and Tuesday is still relatively warm. Mountainous areas, our trend is back into the 70s for the weekend. So this should be sunny, bright, comfortable. Again, less in the way of moisture for us. And we're going to keep things pretty quiet and dry as we head into Monday and Tuesday, and desert communities still holding on to the triple digits. But note how Sunday and Monday are the warmest days on the board here. So those are the days that will be above 105, feeling at least a little bit above historical average, as again, that marine layer thins as we go through the end of the weekend. For KPBS News, I'm AccuWeather meteorologist Melissa Constanzer.
If you've ever been to one small community in our county, you may have wondered how it came to have such an unusual name. As Ken Kramer shows us, the answer involves some history, some geography, and a story about San Diego.
Beautiful area up here, don't you think? The sun sparkling through a canopy of trees, roads so picturesque, just like the place it's named for in England. That's right, in England, in Newcastle, amidst the old buildings dripping with tradition and history, there is a public park called Jasmine Dean. You can look at the tourist brochures and see it is beautiful, Jasmine Dean. Well, when Mr. W.G. Moore came to San Diego County and started developing this area on what is today the east side of Interstate 15 north of Highway 78, it made him think of that place so far away. So he called his project Jasmine Dean Estates. In 1932, he wrote that he was planning a couple of dozen homes. He had already spent more than $10,000 on 2 of them already, where the Jasmine Dean Park of England could offer croquet, swimming, boating, dancing, and rustic walking. The Jasmine Dean of San Diego County would offer beauty in its own way. That was the promise. Well, a couple of years later, in 1934, it was sold again, the new owner pledging to make further improvements, and he did. And after all these years and much more development, the name has stuck. Look on maps near Escondido. If you've ever seen it and wondered, that's how it's pronounced, by the way, Jasmine Dean. Decades later, I bet Mr. Moore would appreciate that it's still remembered, and perhaps especially so that there's our county's own Jasmine Dean Park there. A few thousand miles away from its British namesake, maybe, but in its own way, something beautiful and historic about San Diego.
I always learn so much with Ken Kramer's stories. And if you want to see more of his stories about San Diego, you can tune in tonight and every Thursday night at 8 o'clock right here on KPBS. And here is a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom on NPR's Morning Edition. Congressional forecasters say President Trump's tariffs could shave nearly $3 trillion off the federal debt if they remain in place for a decade. And that is a big if. And no more free parking. KPBS Roundtable is discussing the parking policy reforms just approved this week, including charging on Sundays and dynamic metered pricing. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for watching. I'm Maya Trabulsi. I hope you have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, air, restoration, and flood services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.